the clinking of glasses, the quiet hum of celebration. Warm golden light reflecting off polished silverware. Clara sat at the center of it all, her graduation cap a little crooked, cheeks still flushed from the standing ovation. She had made it. Honors, scholarship offers, and a proud family. Or so she thought. I sat to her right. My husband, Daniel, stood across from us, raising his champagne glass with that same polished smile he wore at every fundraiser, every board dinner, every family event where we played the role of perfect. Then he said it. I've decided to start a new life, without Evelyn. Silence fell like a curtain. Forks froze midair. Conversation stopped. My daughter's smile disappeared. For a moment, I didn't blink, didn't breathe. I just looked at the man I had spent 25 years building a life with, and I smiled. Thank you, I said softly, for your honesty. Gasps spread through the room. Some people turned to each other. Others just stared at me, waiting for an outburst. A slap, a scream, something. But instead, I reached into my handbag and pulled out a cream-colored envelope. I stood up. My heels echoed on the marble floor as I walked around the table. I gently placed the envelope next to Daniel's plate. He blinked. What is this? I leaned in. Calm. Controlled. Something you'll want to read after dessert. Then I turned to Clara. Her eyes were wide, her mouth slightly open. I kissed her on the forehead. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. This is still your day. She nodded, slowly, confused, like her mind hadn't caught up yet. Then I looked around the room. Dozens of familiar faces, friends, mentors, extended family, all watching, holding their breath. Please enjoy the rest of the meal, I said. The risotto smelled delicious. I picked up my purse, smoothed out my dress, and walked out. I didn't look back. The sound of the door closing behind me was the most satisfying silence I'd heard in years. Outside, the summer air hit me like heat from an open oven, but it felt good. Fresh. Clean. I took one step forward, then another. Then I heard it. The door flew open behind me. Evelyn. What the hell was that? Daniel's voice. Loud. Panicked. Losing control. I didn't stop walking. Not yet. Not until I smiled. Because he had just stepped into a game I had already won. 3 months before that graduation dinner, I stopped sleeping through the night. It started small, a dinner receipt that didn't match the place Daniel said he'd been. A charge at a boutique jewelry store in a city he claimed not to visit. Then a hotel booking confirmation at midnight. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I went to the kitchen, made myself a tea, and sat in silence, my hands resting on the cold countertop. The only movement in the room was the steam rising from my mug. In that stillness, I made a choice. I wouldn't ask questions. I would watch. Daniel was always the charming one, the talker, the dreamer. But me? I was the planner. The one who managed our finances, remembered tax deadlines, paid tuition on time, even when he forgot birthdays. So I did what I do best. I gathered evidence. I checked our joint accounts. I reviewed statements. I checked credit cards, Venmo, PayPal, even his airline loyalty points. And slowly, a pattern began to appear. Regular transfers to a new account. Charges for weekend stays at boutique hotels, always for two. Designer handbags. Spa visits. Jewelry from stores I had never set foot in. It felt like watching a stranger's life, one he never shared with me. Then came the name. Tessa J. Lorne. It appeared on a digital gift receipt for a necklace engraved with the words, "Thank you for believing in me. This life is ours now." I stared at the screen. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe. She was 20 years younger. Blonde. She worked at a small contemporary art gallery downtown, the one Daniel had suddenly taken such an interest in. I remembered meeting her once. At a donor brunch. She smiled a little too long. Called me ma'am. And now she was part of a plan I hadn't been invited to. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't tell a soul. I printed every receipt, labeled every folder, created a secure drive, and backed up all the evidence. Then I remembered something Daniel probably hoped I had forgotten. The prenup he insisted on when we got married. Back when I had money, and he had only ambition. A prenup with one very clear clause, fidelity. So I booked an appointment with a quiet, no-nonsense lawyer named Lauren Reyes. No small talk. No sympathy, just facts. I laid everything out. She flipped through every page without blinking. Then she looked up and said, "You don't need to confront him. Not yet. Let him keep thinking you're asleep. That's when men get careless." I nodded, and the plan began. Not loud, not dramatic, just like the slow turning of a key in a locked door. The house was quiet. Daniel had left for yet another consulting weekend, his cologne still hanging in the air like a lie that lingered too long. I didn't waste any time. I opened his tablet. He had gotten careless. Months ago, he used to log out of everything: emails, bookings, even his gallery's client list. But now, he was too sure of himself, too convinced I had no clue. One click opened his synced inbox. Another revealed the full message history with Tessa. "This weekend's perfect. I told Evelyn it's a business retreat. She has no idea, babe. She's still busy planning Clara's graduation. I looked at that new place near the marina. Feels like home already." I didn't flinch. I exported the messages, saved them, and emailed everything to my secure backup, click by click. Then I checked his calendar. A private meeting with a leasing agent was scheduled. I looked up the name, found the building, and called the next day, not as Evelyn Hartley, but as a potential co-signer. The woman on the phone was overly polite. "Oh, Mr. Hartley already applied. He listed a joint income. Are you the Evelyn on the documents?" My stomach didn't turn anymore. The anger wasn't hot. It had cooled, hardened into something sharper. I told her we'd be withdrawing. Quietly, legally, permanently. I faxed updated ownership documents, contacted our bank, froze all pending transactions with one signed request, a power I had over our accounts for years. Daniel never realized how much control he had given me. Every tax form, every investment, every refinance. It was all in my name. "For convenience," he once said. Now, that convenience was power. Lauren, my attorney, filed the first motion, an emergency petition to freeze all joint assets, citing suspicion of hidden transfers. Approved within 48 hours. The prenup, signed by Daniel, with the fidelity clause clearly underlined, was now part of a sealed court document. Daniel had no idea. He was still sending voice notes to Tessa. "The apartment's ours next month. After the graduation dinner, I'll finally be free." He wasn't lying. He just didn't know what freedom would cost him. Because the countdown had already started, and I wasn't planning revenge anymore. I was carrying it out, one digital move at a time. Daniel always loved grand gestures. Fancy trips, surprise dinners, spontaneous weekends that always seemed to need my credit card. So, of course, with someone new, he couldn't just sneak around. He had to make it official. The apartment near the marina was supposed to be a fresh start. Big windows, sleek kitchen, 2 bedrooms, just in case Tessa wanted a family. He submitted the application with both their names. Claimed joint income, listed assets, mostly mine. Paid the deposit. Called it their new chapter. But here's the thing. It never existed. Because 2 weeks before he submitted anything, I had already been there. I walked into the leasing office on my lunch break. Wore a navy blazer. Signed in as Evelyn Hartley Carter, my full legal name. "I'm just verifying something," I told the manager. "My husband Daniel and I share financial power of attorney. Nothing moves forward without my confirmation." She nodded, almost sheepishly. "Of course, ma'am. We'll need full approval first." I left my number. When Daniel submitted the application, they called me, not him. I flagged the documents, pointed out the false income claims, forwarded the prenup. Then I quietly told them to cancel the file, for good. The deposit? Refunded. The file? Erased. The apartment? Gone. Daniel never got the update. Because I didn't want him to know. Not yet. I wanted him to keep dreaming. To keep building his fantasy life. Like a man decorating a house that was already in flames. And he did. He sent Tessa photos of furniture. Told her to start moving in after Clara's graduation. Promised he'd be done with the old chapter by then. He never questioned why the leasing agent stopped replying. Never noticed the silence. Because Daniel was never about the details. He was all flash. All show. And for years, I kept that show running. Smoothed the edges. Covered the cracks. Balanced the books. But this time, I let the cracks widen. And when they finally reached the foundation, when everything he built began to shake, He'd look around and realize the keys to that apartment never existed. Because the door he was walking through, I had already locked it. Grace's house smelled like chamomile and fresh bread. That quiet comfort you only notice when your world is falling apart. I was in the kitchen when the front door flew open. Clara stood there, still in her graduation dress. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, hands trembling. But her voice, when she spoke, was steady. "Why didn't you tell me?" I set down the tea, walked to her, held her like I did when she was little after nightmares. "Because this day was yours," I whispered. "You deserved one thing untouched." She pulled back and really looked at me. "And Dad just ruined it anyway." We moved to the living room. Grace brought over some blankets. Clara curled up on the couch, her eyes red but sharp. I told her everything. The months of quiet investigation. The bank records. The gallery assistant. The prenup. She listened without saying a word, until I mentioned the apartment. Then she laughed. Short. Bitter. "He told me we couldn't afford new textbooks," she said. And all the while, he was putting down deposits on some beachfront fantasy. The doorbell rang. Grace peeked through the blinds. Her expression shifted. "It's him," she said. "And he's not alone." Clara stood before I could react. "I'll handle it," she said. There was something in her voice, firm, steady, that made me step back. Daniel walked in with Tessa just behind him. She looked nervous, holding her bag like a child in the wrong house. Daniel, on the other hand, was still putting on a show of calm. "We need to talk," he said. "No," Clara snapped. "You need to listen." He started to respond, but she didn't give him the chance. "You lied to Mom for months. You lied to me. You said we were struggling while you were shopping for condos and necklaces. You stood in front of 50 people on the most important day of my life and made it all about you." Daniel froze. Tessa turned to him, eyes wide. "You never told me she had proof," she said quietly. "You said the money was ready, that it was our place, that everything was handled." Daniel's jaw clenched. "I was handling it. By faking income statements." Clara shot back. "By pretending we couldn't afford the electric bill last fall, so I'd work more shifts at the library?" His face went pale. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," he said weakly. "You weren't thinking about that when you signed the lease," I added calmly. "Or when you planned romantic weekends with someone half your age." Tessa flinched. "You told me she was cold," she said. "That she didn't understand you." I looked at her, steady. "No, I understood him just fine. I just stopped saving him from himself." Clara turned to Tessa. "You really thought he'd just walk away from 25 years and start fresh? You thought that fantasy would last?" Tessa looked at Daniel, and for the first time, really saw him. "You said it was clean," she whispered. "That it would be quick. Civil. It still can be." Daniel pleaded. "If everyone just calms down." "Calm?" Clara's voice cut through the room. "You want calm? After destroying our family like a firework finale." She stepped back, crossed her arms. "You should go." Daniel stared at her. "Clara." But she didn't blink. "I won't say it again." Tessa left first. No goodbyes. Just the sound of her heels down the hall, like the end of a dream. Daniel followed. At the door, he turned one last time. "This isn't over," he said. Clara's voice was ice. "Oh, but it is." The courtroom was small, windowless, cold. No drama, no audience. Just gray carpet, buzzing lights, and the faint smell of old paper and stale coffee. Perfect. Daniel showed up 5 minutes late in a wrinkled suit. He looked worn out, like a man trying to patch a sinking ship. I didn't stand when he entered. Lauren, my lawyer, simply gave a nod and opened her binder. Every page was labeled and color-coded. Daniel sat across the aisle with a junior attorney, someone he'd hired in a rush. Business law, not family. He had underestimated everything. The judge entered. A woman in her 60s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense. She scanned the files, adjusted her glasses, and looked directly at Daniel's lawyer. "Do you dispute the prenuptial agreement?" The young man stood, unsure. "Your Honor, we believe the agreement is outdated. It was signed over 25 years ago." Section 14, the judge cut in. "Fidelity clause remains in effect throughout the marriage, including dissolution." She didn't even blink. Daniel leaned forward, whispered something. His lawyer didn't answer. The judge continued. Mrs. Hartley submitted substantial proof of undisclosed financial activity, unapproved transfers, property applications under shared income. She paused. Mr. Hartley, do you deny these actions? Daniel cleared his throat. I misunderstood the limits of the agreement. The apartment wasn't finalized. But the intent was, the judge replied, flipping another page. Intent to defraud still carries legal consequences, especially with this level of documentation. I sat still. No smile. No tears. Just calm. Daniel shifted. His tie looked too tight. Therefore, the judge said, this court orders the freeze on all joint assets to remain in place until full discovery is complete. Mr. Hartley may access only his personal checking account. Daniel's lawyer sank lower in his seat. But the judge wasn't done. The family home remains in Mrs. Hartley's possession, as outlined in the prenup. Emergency holds on secondary accounts and investments are also granted. Daniel leaned back like he'd been hit. And in a way, he had. This is ridiculous, he muttered. The judge raised an eyebrow. What's ridiculous is thinking a legal contract expires because you wish it would. We'll reconvene in 30 days. Gavel. Bang. Hearing over. I stood steady. Daniel rushed after me into the hallway. Evelyn, wait, this is out of control. I turned to face him. No, this is control. You just don't have it anymore. 25 years. That has to mean something. It did, I said gently. Until you decided it didn't. I walked away. He didn't follow. Because now, finally, he understood. The game was over. And I had been holding the board the whole time. 6 months later, I stood by the window of my new office. Sunlight poured onto the hardwood floor. A fresh orchid bloomed on the windowsill. And on the frosted glass door, in simple gold letters, was my name. Evelyn Hartley, Financial Transitions. It wasn't just an office. It was proof. I hadn't just survived the betrayal. I had rebuilt from its ashes. In the beginning, I worked out of a small rented room in a shared office downtown. Quiet. Simple. But the word spread fast. Women started showing up. Some heartbroken. Some angry. Some scared. And I didn't just help them with budgets or account tracking. I helped them understand what belonged to them, what was fair, what they truly deserved. I gave them something I never had, not until it was nearly too late. A plan. And when they left, they didn't just carry folders and spreadsheets. They left with dignity. Clara came by nearly every weekend. Sometimes with cookies. Sometimes with wine. Sometimes with funny stories about dating or the chaos of grad school. But no matter what, she always had that same look in her eyes, pride. One afternoon, she leaned against the edge of my desk and said, you know, if Dad had just been honest from the beginning, he might have walked away with half. I smiled gently. Sometimes people can't see past the fantasy they're chasing, not until it all falls apart. She nodded. Well, he lost the fantasy. You found yourself. She was right. The house that once felt full of silence, full of shadows, was now mine. No lies. No pretending. Just peace. And Daniel? He faded away quietly. The beachfront condo never happened. Tessa left just days after the court hearing. Took her things, her hopes, and whatever trust she had left. Our mutual friends? They stopped calling. Not because I asked them to choose sides, but because truth has gravity. And eventually, it pulls the mask off everything. Last I heard, he was living in a small rental on the edge of town. The business? Downsized. Restructured. Quiet. Sometimes, I still think back to that night at the restaurant. The sudden stillness of silverware. Clara's shocked face. The weight of the envelope I placed on the table. That wasn't revenge. It was freedom. Not just from him, but from the version of me who always stayed quiet. Who always cleaned up the mess. Who always waited her turn. That woman is gone. And the one who replaced her? She doesn't wait anymore. She builds. She leads. She breathes. Enjoyed the story? Give it a like and let us know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. More powerful stories are just around the corner.